Financing for Development. Unlocking Investment Opportunities. Unlocking Investment Opportunities, World Bank Group Approaches and Initiatives with Joaquim Levy.
In the past year, the World Bank Group has adopted a new roadmap called the Forward Look. This map aims to transform the World Bank Group from not just being a provider of capital, but also to be a facilitator of deploying capital from different sources. And we have already taken many steps in this direction. First, we have revitalized the International Development Association, IDA, the World Bank Group's Fund for the Poor, through upgrades to its financing model. Last year, IDA earned a AAA credit rating by Moody's and S&P, which enabled IDA to leverage its equity by raising funds in debt markets. With these changes, every $1 in partner contributions enable about $3 in spending authority for the world's poorest countries. IDA's ability to access capital markets is one of the most concrete achievements following the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in support of the SDGs. Actually, there is enormous recognition that this change have a great impact on the way development financing is delivered, in part because with the additional room that the leverage afforded, IDA was able to introduce a number of new windows and programs, such as the private sector window, that were in many cases geared towards addressing the need of de-risking projects in low-income countries. What is remarkable is that later last year, in December 2016, in a time of fiscal constraints globally, a coalition of more than 60 donors and borrower governments made a record $75 billion commitment to IDA 18 for the next 3 years, which was a 50% increase from the last replenishment that had raised $50 billion 3 years ago. This significant achievement will enable the world's poorest countries to receive the additional support they need to grow, create opportunities for employment, and increase their resilience to shocks and crises. But we are also embarking on other exciting new changes across our IBRD and IDA portfolio. In particular, in order to ensure that scarce public resources, including those entrusted to us, are used to the best effect and only when and where they are necessary, we are developing a cascading approach to financing, especially for infrastructure projects. This cascading approach prescribes that private sector solutions are considered first, then public-private partnerships, and if the first two are not feasible, only then public sector solutions are pursued. This approach would free up scarce public resources and allow them to be deployed to facilitate reforms and expand the pool of well-structured projects that can be financed with commercial capital. This kind of thinking has worked before. As you know, the private sector has had an increasing role in the provision of infrastructure in many countries in Latin America. The experience of the last 20 years actually showed that with all the ups and downs, this is a resilient approach. And we could also take the Turkey energy sector. Over the past 15 years, consistent reforms has led to market liberalization, billions in private sector investment, and finally, a fully competitive market. So we're now working to systematize and to scale up this approach, responding to the specific conditions of every country, but also creating a general framework for much broader mobilization. We are going to achieve this through a three-pronged approach. First, we'll help governments create an enabling environment for business and private investments. Also prepare projects, build strong project pipelines, and lower existing information barriers. In addition to the systematic work of our Sustainable Development VPU, we are also supporting the global infrastructure finance to do exactly that. And with the help of several donors, they are working in developing a pipeline of well-prepared investment-ready infrastructure projects, as well as working on improving and standardizing procurement process so that the whole process becomes much more affordable and also more predictable, helping to attract investors. In this approach, we'll continue the dialogue with our member countries to address all these regulatory issues, and we're going to do that as we have been doing together with IFC and MIGA. Well, the second part of this approach is that we're going to continue to explore different ways of risk sharing with the private sector so that we align opportunity to their risk appetite. For instance, we are making the World Bank Group guarantees, both at project and portfolio levels, more understandable, and looking for ways to scale up their use so that we can unify the use of these instruments across the whole World Bank Group with the adequate incentive within our institution for the different players, and also an enhanced dialogue with our clients so that they fully understand the potential of these instruments. Guarantees are a key instrument that can help mobilize capital for projects that are viable, but will not proceed otherwise unless investors and lenders are protected against certain risks or catastrophes. By reducing project risk, the guarantees expand access to funding from a broader universe of investors and savings. This is a good way also to optimize the use of our own capital and leverage our understanding of risk in countries and about projects. And the World Bank Group already offers a range of guarantee instruments which can be issued in different currencies for many sectors and structured to match the needs of individual transactions. But in addition to the simplification that I mentioned, the approach will be also expanded with the implementation of IDA's private sector window that I referred at the beginning. This window will support pioneering private sector investments at the country level that would otherwise not have been funded, especially in fragile states. The third part of this approach is through the support of the development of domestic capital and of instruments suitable to institutional investors so that you can mobilize domestic resources and foreign investments. Competitive domestic markets, especially capital markets that respond to demands, are central to the sustainability of development gains and advancing inclusive economic opportunities. IFC and the World Bank have been working together to advise governments on developing liquid and robust capital markets so that you will help to channel domestic savings of countries to financing developing projects. This has been our practice, and again, we're systematizing so that you can scale it up. Also, a separate creating market advisory window financed out of IFC profits addresses the rising demand for advisory services and capacity building in the poor and fragile areas. And several parts of the World Bank groups are also developing tools that will help local investors to enhance the credit quality of infrastructure bonds so that they can also be, for instance, bought by local institutional investors. So there are many ways of using domestic capital markets. But as I mentioned, we are also working with global institutional investors also to create in-house opportunities for them in the infrastructure space. The IFC's Managed Co-Lending Portfolio Program, MCPP, for infrastructure, and its asset management company, AMC, have made strides in this area of bringing global institutional investors to infrastructure in developing countries. Further innovation could entail also developing tools such as fixed income infrastructure indexes and emerging market infrastructure linked bonds, as well as vehicles to recycle infrastructure loans and assets with the help of the government. So there are many ways. But let me provide a little bit more detail on the IFC product. The IFC asset management companies mobilize third-party capital to co-invest in projects with IFC. Launched in 2009, it has over $9 billion in assets under management across 13 funds that invest in the equity in the capital of companies throughout the developing world. The more recent Managed Co-Lending Portfolio Program, the MCPP, will focus on infrastructure and will enable institutional investors to invest together in the fixed income space with IFC in a portfolio of projects. It will raise $5 billion of private capital for investment in emerging market infrastructure loans in the next 5 years. It is also worth mentioning, since we're talking about mobilization, the strategy pursued by MIGA based on reinsuring at the market its risks so that it can continue to expand its balance sheet. And actually, through that, MIGA has been able to anticipate some of its targets in terms of growth of their portfolios. And doing this, keeping risk at comfortable and sustainable levels. We could also mention the World Bank Treasury and other areas that continue to create instruments that allow finance to do one of its main functions, which is to separate risks so that they can be carried by different types of investments. This is what we do when, for instance, we separate credit risk from natural disaster risks through the issuance of catastrophic bonds on behalf of our country members. The same is true for the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility, the PEF, and other instruments, including bonds in local currencies. So we saw that there are many means of doing that, and we are pursuing that in a very systematic way. It's important to note that our ability to deliver on everything I just mentioned, and especially on the 2030 agenda, depends crucially on the World Bank's group financial strength. This makes safeguarding financial sustainability critical to our institutional success. Only as a financially viable institution can we remain relevant and fit for purpose as an effective development partner to help our clients deliver the SDGs. For this reason, we have taken a number of measures over the last 3 years to ensure expenditure savings and revenue increases, along with new approaches to further stretch our balance sheet. Together, these measures have made the World Bank Group stronger and more sustainable. And looking forward, we have to continue to strive for efficiency as well as excellence and the readiness to innovate, while preventing undue risk. We know that with all the efforts on our part, we cannot follow this agenda alone. We have to continue to work closely with our partner multilateral development banks, the UN, the private sector, civil society, and all governments to implement these new development finance approaches. Moreover, we have to listen to the experience of people around the globe. And actually, this is why last year we organized the Development Finance Forum in Dublin, which provided us a great opportunity to hear about successful experiences from the people who are doing that in Africa, in South Asia, the private sector, entrepreneurs, people that have really taken successful steps in changing development, the way we see development. Also, that was an opportunity to discuss ways to de-risk investments and to create the adequate incentives and room, sometimes regulatory room, for investors so that they also can take a little bit more of risk when that is sustainable. This year, we're going to have a similar forum that will take place in Africa, and I think it will again be very helpful to unlock investment opportunities, particularly in this continent. We look forward to continuing to innovate and engage with our partners to scale up development finance and unlock investment opportunities in support of the SDG. This is really core to our business, and I can tell you this is an exciting time for development. Thank you very much.